My name's Mike. I'm an alcoholic. One day I went for my lunch outside a pub in Wimbledon. There was an army recruiting team and they were there showing off various weaponry, and they gave me a card and told me if I fancied joining, go to the Tower of London on Monday and I will be able to see this Major Smith, and he will take me to Charing Cross House and he will sign me up if that's what I want to do. And that's what I did, and I set off with this little suitcase, skinny, shy, non-streetwise, 16-year-old lad going off this vast ramp up to this vast expanse of tarmac in this barracks. That night, after training, we were taken down to the NAFI, which was the Navy, Army, Air Force Institute Club, and I was given a razor. I was told to shave because that's what the men do. And then they were brought trays of beer out and put them on the tables, and we started to drink this beer. This was the first time I'd actually tasted alcohol in any large format, really, in any way, shape and form. And as it went in, and as I started drinking, nothing really happened apart from that I started to feel easier. I started to feel warmer. All the people I was frightened of, there were 35 of us in that room. A lot of them were there because they didn't go to prison and they joined the army, and all sorts of other things. People were there, different characters from all different walks of life. I woke up next morning outside a barrack block, in a bed, having wet it, messed it, been sick in it, eyes out on stalks, steam coming out the ears, regimental sergeant major pointing a stick at my nose and telling me I really shouldn't be there. And I just could stop my story there if I wanted to, because that's basically what my form my drinking took, which was basically I drank, I got into trouble, and as that alcoholism continued to get worse throughout my drinking, so the trouble I got into did as well. And I had 10 years in the army where I functioned as a drill and weapon training instructor, got to the rank of sergeant at the end of my service, and managed to function during the time, but all the time in the rest of my life and in my life in general, throughout that 10 years, wherever I was, whatever I was doing, drink was the answer to everything that I had. It revolved around the bottle. My alcoholism was rife right from the very first drink. I got married in the army. I got divorced in the army. I have a daughter today from that marriage. I did 5 tours in Northern Ireland. I saw some horrible times and situations while I was over there. People being blown up, picking people's bodies up off the street. That's the way it was in Northern Ireland, having all these disastrous things. And I know today that having seen all the shocking events and shocking things that happened to me, I used to suppress all those feelings of disgust and horror by drinking. And my drinking used to suppress those feelings that I had, so I didn't really ever develop them. So hence the reason in my day when I was in the army, a lot of people didn't come out of the army and have the support and the good things that go on in the army life today, where, you know, people who come out with mental problems and that type of thing. And I know today they come out with mental problems and drink problems. That didn't happen in my day. No one ever mentioned AA to me. No one never remember having a drink problem. I used to wet the bed nearly every day, and I used to have to pay for mattresses no matter where I was in the world. And I used to get charged, not charged and have to pay for them, which I did anyway, but I also got charged for causing self-inflicted wounds, as they called it in those days in the army, because they didn't understand in those days. And I wasn't the only one. There were lots of people I know, friends and colleagues in the forces, who used to drink. Whether they drank like me, I don't know. But I used to have this problem all the time. I was verbally aggressively violent to my wife. I did sort of went to slap her one day, and in the time that we were together, and I didn't want to be in that marriage. I didn't love her. As soon as I met her, and she was in the army as well, she had to leave because I was a junior rank and she was a captain, and she had to leave. We got married within 6 weeks of being engaged. It was just a crazy, crazy situation. It was drink fueled, everything about it. And even when I went and got married, and I got married in Liverpool, she was from Liverpool, and we got married in Toxteth, and I went off to the wedding. I borrowed the suit, shirt, tie, boots, because I didn't have any of that stuff when I was in the army. So all my friends and colleagues put me in all this stuff in those days. And I'm going back now to this was 69. I was just 19, and I got married to this woman. And it was just crazy. It was a crazy time. I got drunk on the wedding, at the do afterwards, and I got drunk on the wedding night, and there wasn't a wedding night. There wasn't anything like that. And at the end, everybody throughout my army service was always saying to me, you need to do something about your drinking. Your drinking's causing other problem, and it's causing you a problem as well, and you need to do something about it. I left the army purely and simply because of alcohol. What we call in AA is an alcoholic geographical, where you want to go somewhere else where nobody knows who you are, that nobody knows that you're an alcoholic. No one was going to talk to you about your drinking or tell you off. And I decided one day in Colchester, where I was based, that I would go to Cheltenham to the police college and go and see whether I could join the police force. And I went to Chelmsford Police College. That morning I was hungover, and I went to see, I remember the inspector I saw at reception, and they gave me the induction exam, whatever it, to go in there. How I passed it, I haven't got a clue. So I just joined the police force. I'd done the induction course, and in March 1975, I went to Nottingham, to Arnold, to the Nottinghamshire Police Headquarters for an induction course. And then I did that for a week, and I was staying at the YMCA in Nottingham. And then they sent me, along with all the other recruits from the Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire and Derbyshire force, to Panlash near Harrogate in Yorkshire to do my training for 3 months. And my drinking in the police force was exactly the same as it was in the army. I had a blanket in the police force that was wrapped around me. If I ever got into trouble, my colleagues used to pull me out of trouble. If it was drink related and that type of thing, wasn't regularly put in front of any officer or any senior individual that was standing there and looking at me and saying, Mike, you should know better and you're doing this. That didn't happen in the police. I managed to survive in some way. I never used to drink on duty, but I always used to drink before and after my shift. And sometimes I came on duty, not the worse for wear, but I certainly must have smelt of alcohol, and was bags and bags of mints and all that type of thing that I used to have to pump down my neck. So we used to arrest people, I did anyway. I used to arrest people for drinking and driving, and I would go to the pub that night and drink 3 times more than them and drive my car home. I've driven my car with colleagues from the police. While I've been doing the pedals, they've been steering and changing the gears and all sorts of things where we've alternated what we were doing and managed to get home. I've driven my car by line watching and trying to make sure that I got home safe, and thank God never actually had an accident in the police. I've been stopped by the police, and I was in Derbyshire one night, one particular incident, and I'd had a drink, and they came up to the car, tapped on the window, and I wound it down. I told them I was police, so I showed them my warrant card, and believe it or believe it not, they let me go. And that's what used to happen. I was so bloody lucky that I could have created all sorts of situations. Towards the end of my police career, there were lots of people in the police force that drank like me, behaved like me, acted like me. No one ever mentioned Alcoholics Anonymous. Not even the hierarchy. There was no support system whatsoever for people who had alcoholism. There was a lot of sickness in the police force, with people with alcoholism, as I know it today, going off and being sick for long periods of time during their careers and during the time I was in the police. Funnily enough, I never did. I don't know why. I never actually took any time off to be sick, probably because I didn't particularly want to. I did get the same sort of reaction to a lot of things from senior officers where, they used to say to me, we know about your drinking and, be careful what you're doing, all that type of thing. But they never actually did anything about it. They never actually suggested another course of action or there were no other units you could go to. We didn't have that sort of thing in the police force in those days. It was getting to the stage where my drinking was becoming increasingly nearly every day then. I was like topped up most of the days. I was in Nottingham with Nottingham Forest at the time, who were a massive club and were in Europe and all that type of thing. And I used to book every single overtime I possibly could do at Nottingham Forest ground so I could watch the football. I went off duty from that football match, got back to the station, got changed, took me tie off. I was in part civvies and a civvy jacket, and walked down the road to a party that was going on in one of the factories at the bottom of Queen Street, down the road from where the police station was, with a colleague who was also a boozer. And we went in there. Basically, we got drunk. He ended up having a fight with somebody in there. We were both thrown out of that place, down the stairs. They'd call the police force. They'd call the station, my station, and the guys from the station came and picked me and my colleague up. I was taken back to the police station. I was put in the cells with the guys I'd arrested at the football match that day, and some of them had seen us come in there. They weren't very happy. The desk sergeant, as he was then, was laughing his head off, believe it or not, because we were still in part uniform and he knew who we bloody were. And as a result of that situation, apart from being called a stupid idiot and what do you think, I was thrown in front of the Chief Constable of Nottingham, who at the time's name was Charles McLachlan. He was a great guy. I used to really like him. He was a nice bloke. And I stood in front of him, and he said to me, he was going to dock my pay, I think, a couple of bands. I can't remember exactly what it was now, his terminology. But I wasn't going to get sacked. I wasn't going to be asked to leave the police force. He was basically going to slap my wrist and put me on a disciplinary and that type of thing. But you see, this alcoholic had already planned his next alcoholic geographical, because I undid my pocket, I pulled out my resignation, and I slung it in front of the Chief Constable of Nottingham and told him to fucking stuff his job. And I walked out. And that's what alcoholics do, because they want their own way, and that's what we do to get our own way. So I left the police force, went to work for Rank Xerox, and joined the company in Nottingham. I decided to leave Nottingham and get a transfer to Scotland, because I met a girl who was to become my second wife. But it was just a nightmare, because I moved up to Scotland having seen a tea towel in the shop window in Nottingham that showed the rivers of whiskey running all the way through the United Kingdom, and especially in Scotland, where they were saying 24 hours a day drinking, pubs open all this sort of thing. That mentality of the alcoholic up here, oh bloody hell, that would be wonderful. I lived, first of all, in the east coast of Scotland, and we had a wonderful little cottage. Both worked for Rank Xerox. You'd think it would have been an ideal situation, but I was with that woman for 6 years, and I was verbally, physically and mentally abusive to her for 6 years, in drink. Never put her in hospital, always managed to hurt her because I knew how to, because of what I'd been trained to do in the army and the police force. She put up with that, always saying that she wanted me to get better and she was going to help me. She became my drinking partner to begin with. So she used to go out and drink like I did. She couldn't contain it, so she stopped. I was just a nasty, horrible piece of work. I can't explain it in words so simple. And then one day, I lived in the central region of Scotland. One day I went out and had a day off, as every self-righteous alcoholic does. What do? They go off and they have a drink. So I went off to the hotel that was up the road, and in the car, drove up the hill to this particular hotel, stayed in there from about 10 o'clock in the morning right through to the evening. I got drunk. I must have slept it off for a while, and then I'd started drinking again. And that night they threw me out of the place. It was February. It was snowing. They threw the car keys at me and told me not to come back. So I must have done something during the day that was just horrendous. I don't know what to this day. I then drove my car down a steep hill to a roundabout at the bottom, and negotiated that roundabout in the middle of this rush hour traffic, and drove off into the place I was living. Overtook some roadworks, had a head-on collision with another car. I woke up in A&E in the hospital in the town that I was in, and Jill was sitting next to me. And I didn't wake up and say, "Oh my God, what's happened? Where am I?" I woke up and asked for a mint, because I didn't want them to smell the booze on my breath, not realising that I'd been brought in from this accident in an ambulance. The police were there, they were in reception, I was in the treatment room, and as I was being wheeled in to be stitched up, a policeman came and put his head down by my ear, and he said, "I hope you're satisfied, you bastard, the other guy died." Now, I didn't sit there and say, "Oh my God, what about his wife? What about his children? Who is he? What is he? What have I done?" I didn't say that at all. I just said, "It's not my fault. He must have had a heart attack. I'm going to get a good solicitor and I'll get off with it." And that was it. I was wheeled in to be stitched up and treated. I went home after the treatment. The police didn't come round for about 5 days to my flat at that stage where we were living. And they came in, and I was charged in the flat for being unfit through drink and drugs and for causing death by dangerous driving. And I waited 9 months to go to court and never changed anything. I was drinking and driving, drinking the same, doing exactly, and the behaviour was still the same to my then wife as she was then. And that's how it went on. I went to court. I was stood opposite his family in the dock, and I was smiling. I had this arrogant grin on my face where I was saying, "I don't care what happens, because I'll be able to get through it, because I've been in the army and the police force." And I was just mad. I was totally insane at all this going on. And the sheriff actually, sentenced me to be put in Bellini prison. And that's where I ended up, in Bellini prison. And in the block, people knew who I was. So I just had to be careful every day what I was doing. But I worked in reception, and they kept me out of the way with some of the prisoners who were in there for lesser, charges like insurance fraud and that, and various other things like that. Regularly, I would hide in one of these cubicles that was in reception, and I used to cry myself back to some sort of normality. It was the horriblest, nastiest time of my life. I don't wish that sort of life on anybody, but I used to have to suffer the consequences of what I've done, and that was part of it. And I stuck by it and said, well, I'll get through this because I've been in the army and the police. When I came out of prison at 6 o'clock in the morning, Jill was there. She took me home. And on the dining room table, this is the woman who I'd been abusing for 6 years, there were 3 bottles of whiskey on the dining room table. And she said to me, I thought you might need these. Within an hour, I'd drunk one of those bottles of whiskey, and I was in the backyard on the lawn in T-shirt, flip-flops and shorts in the middle of winter with this bottle singing I'm Free. I was totally mentally insane and should have been locked up then. How I got back to High Wycombe, where my sister was, from London, I don't know to this day. I haven't got a clue. My sister decided to give me a room in the back of her house, and I could stay there. I had a brown holdall with 5 bottles of whiskey in it. And every time I drank one, I had to go to the off licence to get another one to put it back in the bottle because I didn't want to be without booze. I used to drink in that room from a non-spill mug, whiskey and coke, every hour. I ended up seeing a psychiatrist in there on the request of my sister. And he just asked me all these questions, and I told him I was on everything that I could think of. Valium, prescription drugs, coke, you name it. I was just telling him I was on all this stuff. And he transferred me from Wickham General to Stone Mental Hospital in Aylesbury. And that was in January 1987. And I went in there in the first week of January 1987, and I haven't had a drink since. Now, I don't class my sobriety date until the 27th of February because I actually, although I was still in there, I was still in a mental state, which I was cuckoo, and I knew I was mad because there was a guy in there who had his feet up on the windowsill because he had elephantitis in his legs, and his name was George. And I used to go and sit and talk with him every now and again. Halfway through the conversation, he would start singing Henry VIII I Am. And I knew I was mad because I used to start singing it with him. And I didn't know this for 6 months, but I apparently rang AA. And this guy called Peter, who I still know today, bless him, he came in to see me and he looked me in the face and he said, "Mike, do you think you're an alcoholic?" Now, although the doctors had assessed me, given me a full medical, and there was nothing wrong with me physically, and I couldn't believe that, I just looked at him and said yes. Because I just wanted somebody to put a name to my madness, to me, who I am, an alcoholic. And he took me to my first meeting on a Wednesday night, first Wednesday I was in there, in Tame. And I sat there on my hands, shivering, wondering what was going to go on, not understanding what AA was all about. And a guy was sitting at the front who was the speaker, and the secretary was sitting next to him. And this guy started to talk, and I started to identify him because he'd been in the RAF. And I also started to smile. I started to laugh. Not because I had relief because I was there, but this guy doing the chair, his name was Peter the Rug. And the reason they call him Peter the Rug was because he wore a wig. And every time he spoke, the wig moved. It was one of those that looked like he was just sitting on top. And I was, not just me, but we weren't laughing at him, we were laughing with him because he was a funny guy. And I started to feel a bit of relief. But the most important thing of all was, amazingly, people started to share back with him round the room. And I started to hear these people telling my story. People who hadn't done as badly as I'd done in in alcoholism. There were people there who'd done worse than me. Lads who'd been in prison for 22 years and come out and started drinking. All this sort of stuff was just absolutely amazing. And I identified with so much. The end of the meeting, they came round, put their arm around me and gave me a cup of tea and a piece of cake and just said, "Keep coming back." And I sat on my bed after I came back that night and I made a decision that changed my life. I said, I'm going to go to AA. I'm going to listen to what these people tell me. I'm not going to argue about it. I'm not going to try and figure it out. I'm not going to analyse it. I'm not going to make a big thing out of it. I'm just going to do it. And from that day, that's what I did. I went to a few more meetings while I was in the hospital. And then in February, at the beginning of February, on the 27th of February, I went to my first meeting with my sister, who drove me to my first meeting in High Wycombe. And that was on a Friday night. And that was the 27th of February. So on the 27th of February this year, I'd have been sober 35 years. I was working the programme, doing everything that was suggested. And then along came my sponsor. His name was Buru, because he was like a big bear, and his name was Pat. And he took me through the programme of AA, the 12 steps. Every month for 12 months, we did one step. I did the traditions, which is also part of the AA program, which is more like the business aspect of AA in the traditions that we have. And I also went through the concepts of the program and what AA is all about. I just wanted so much information about the fellowship and what it was like. And during my time with him, the story I've just told you is what we call a step 4, where we tell our sponsors exactly what we've done, and then we decide on what we're going to do with it in step 5, basically. And as we work the program, making amends and all that. I will just say here and now that I made amends to the guy that I killed by a Catholic priest in the fellowship giving me an amends prayer. I took and found out where that guy was buried in Scotland, and I went to the foot of his grave and I read this amends prayer out at the grave. Because in our step 9 it says to make amends to such people except when to do so would injure them or others. And I couldn't possibly make amends to his family except in here. But I just wanted to read this prayer out to him, not to make me feel better, but just to understand that I'd actually tried to make amends to this guy, and hopefully wherever he was, he would, accept that along with his family. I don't talk about that death in any way other than being amazingly sorry for what I did. There is no way you can say sorry for those type of things except to yourself initially, because I am the one that had to make amends to first of all, and then all the other people. But the key to all this for me, and I'm sitting here today because part of my program, doing the program with your sponsor and working the steps and having a good life, and I'll finish with all that in a minute, is that I've dedicated my life to AA, to put back into the fellowship and into my life the stuff that I've been given by being a recovering alcoholic, a grateful recovering alcoholic. All the stuff I've done in AA, stuff like this, conventions, sponsoring people, bringing the message to the outside world, if you like, and all the other organisations that get involved with AA now, and we get involved with them, and none of them knew what alcoholism was. They know it's an illness now because that's what the medical profession have decided it's going to be. The long and the short of it is come to AA, because there are people like you in the fellowship anyway. So if you're worried about going to a meeting thinking you're going to bump into somebody, what you've got to remember is if you do, they're only there for the same reason you are. And they're probably feeling exactly the same as you are. So you will be able, and you'll even be able to talk to those people and share similar things. So it's an advantage if you go to AA, because if you don't find people that are there, everybody else in AA will be there. No one's going to criticise anybody in AA or character and assassinate anybody for what they are or who they are. You come into AA, you sit your bum on a seat, you take the cotton wool out your ears, you stick it in your mouth, and you listen to what these people have got to tell you. If you're feeling bad, you don't even have to say who you are or what you do. That's the key to it all. All you are is a single name. My name's Mike, I'm an alcoholic. And you don't even have to say that at the beginning. Do not be frightened if you've got a problem with drink to come into AA or ask for help. I think it's good that there are organisations today, including the police force, that have these support systems. Use them. Use AA. Use everything you possibly can do, because you don't need to live with the problem, because there are ways now to be able to stop it before it even starts. Or if it's already started, to stop it, to give you a better chance in everything that you do in your life, whether it be your relationship, whether it be work, whether it be physical, mental or emotional. It's all here. That's what AA does. It just gives us everything that we need to be able to live. The programme of AA is a toolbox for living. And the last thing I'll say is that come into AA and you have a bridge for normal living. and you start building that bridge the first day you come through the doors. When the people that see this go out there from their training, from whatever they're doing, and go out into the big wide world, just remember you're only one day away from being an alcoholic if you drink. And if you've got a problem, you're only one day away from being saved by coming into AA. Thank you.